Welcome to High Stakes. I'm your host, Tracey Devlyn. On this show, I chat with authors about the moments in their stories that change everything, what's at stake, what it costs, and why we can't look away. From thrillers to romance to sci-fi and beyond. Let's get to it. Joining me today is author Shen Tao to talk about her debut epic fantasy, The Poet Empress. Welcome to the show, Shen.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. This is such an extraordinary debut. You set the scenes so vividly for the reader, and especially for someone like me who hasn't read that many books that are in this era or in this period. And it just, every page is just so rich in flavor. And I can't imagine how you did this as a debut novelist, but also the research involved just must have been incredible.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, first of all. And I'm so honored and ecstatic that you have read my book and liked it, it seems.
Oh, yes,
I think
absolutely.
yeah, it's definitely a tricky balance sometimes, especially when you write in the genres of epic fantasy to balance that accessibility and all the wonderful world building that you want to put in. So I'm really
Yeah.
glad to hear that it worked and it didn't feel like it was too much. It was definitely something I was very conscious about as I was writing the book.
Yeah, yeah, no, you did. You did an amazing job. And, anytime you get fantasy just in general, there's sometimes the names can be kind of hard to follow and figuring out who is who. But uh, everybody seemed very accessible. Every character seemed very accessible to me as a reader. And so, brava on that, Shen, because that can be tough to accomplish for sure.
Yeah, thank you. I think a lot of it is just keeping it grounded in real life, people and real life psychology. And it's embarrassing because I don't remember which author said this, but some famous author said you can lie about a lot of things, but you can't lie about the human nature.
Mm.
And I think that is something I try to keep in mind when I'm writing a book. I can lie about this is a fictional world, a fictional dynasty. The events in this book didn't really happen, but are the people responding in a real and realistic way? I think is
Hmm.
something I try to keep in mind as I'm writing.
Yeah, no, it's great. Although you are a debut novelist, I think I read that this isn't your first story that you've written. So I was wondering if you could maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and your writing journey to publication.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. I This isn't the ninth book I've written, so I've always wanted to be a writer. Like ever since I was a little kid, I was one of those awkward kids who was always reading instead of listening to the teacher, and was not to be yelled at for that. So I was always like, head in the clouds, that kind of kid, and I always wanted to be a writer. So I wrote a lot of books over my lifetime, and this was my ninth book. So I wrote eight discarded manuscripts before I came upon the POET EMPRESS, and then this is the one that ended up being published.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And do you think those other eight manuscripts will ever see the light of day after this, or do you think those were, just practice manuscripts and you'll just go on from here?
I love getting that question because I feel like my answer to it changes like every single day.
Okay.
Sometimes like I have said in the past, probably not. I have said in the past, like maybe one day. I think I do view them as my training wheel manuscripts. I think that
Hmm.
each one helped me because I feel like there's a lot of things you can learn about writing that isn't just on a paragraph or sentence level. I think there's a lot to be learned from structurally, how to land endings, how to even the like on the meta level, how to write and revise and building those good habits are all things that can't necessarily be learned paragraph by paragraph. But if you write a book,
Hmm.
you write another book, I think there's room to improve there. So I very much viewed them as my training wheel books. I try not to get, although I was very attached to each book as I was writing it,
Yes,
I try
yes.
to take a step back and look at things from a big picture perspective and think, okay, my career is going to be very long. Even if it isn't this one, I can always improve with the next book. And I think that
Yeah.
mindset sort of kept me going, even when it didn't really seem likely that I was going to be published, when it seemed like it was going to be really challenging, or when other things were happening in my life. I think that's what really kept me going. So I don't regret writing those books at all. I still love all of them dearly. I love the characters dearly. And to get to your question, are they going to be published? I think, yeah, I think I feel a lot of authors must feel this way about their stories and their characters, where these people only exist in your head and in your
Yeah.
manuscript. And if you don't publish this book, then these people will never exist. And it's kind of like doing them a disservice in a way, where you have all your book children, and if you don't let them out in the world, are you contributing to the fact that they never exist? And because I love those characters so much, because I love those stories so much, and I do feel like I want to do justice to them and try to publish that one day. However, on the other hand, I think The Poet Empress, my debut, is just so different from all the other books I've written in terms of both tone and theme and subject matter. It's a lot darker. It's very grounded, compared to, the previous books. I'll just give you a little bit of a picture. I think
Yeah.
they're a little bit more humorous, a bit more high fantasy, a bit more like a rompy,
Yeah.
so it is very, very different. And I've spoken to a bunch of authors, and a lot of authors do sometimes feel this way, where when we publish a book and this becomes our debut, then there's this almost expectation, rather imposed by our readers, by the publisher, or by ourselves. And I think mostly
Hmm.
by ourselves. But we need to write more books that are in a similar vein to sustain that momentum from that first book, versus going back into the treasure trove and like digging up something that's completely unrelated. I don't
Yeah.
know if that makes sense at all, but
No, it makes perfect sense, and it's kind
yeah.
of interesting because I think authors might go through this a little bit too with, what type of POV that they're writing. Are they writing in third person POV point of view, or are they writing in first person point of view? And sometimes they'll try both and see what feels more familiar and more comfortable. And so as you were talking, I was wondering about that. Did you find that this type of voice, which is a little bit darker than sounds like you called them romps. Did that feel a little bit more familiar and comfortable to you, or do you think that you would like to try to make a little bit more of a humorous, whether you go back to previous manuscripts or not, but maybe your next book or the next book after that, do you think adding a little bit more humor to it is kind of that sweet spot for you?
Oh, I love this question. I think you bring up interesting points about POV, because that's something I think a lot of authors do think about, whether they're writing in first person or third person, and what that means for the story. And The Poet Empress is in first person. It is as if the main character is telling the story that happened to her in the past. And when you write in first person, I feel like I almost have to let go of my authorial voice and let the character take over. I think it really depends how you write. Like there are some authors who do a wonderful job of writing, like they've got their own voice, Like I'm
Yeah.
currently reading The Road by Cormac McCarthy, and
Oh,
it's not the character telling the story. It's beautifully, beautifully written, but there is an
yeah.
authorial voice there, and it's very clear. And sometimes the author takes a backseat and kind of lets the character talk. I know, in the writing of the Poet Empress, I really kept in mind that she was just a village girl. She didn't have a large vocabulary. She didn't know the terms for the things that were happening to her, and she didn't have context for a lot of things that were
Yeah.
happening to her. So when you really get deep into the POV of a character, there's almost this kind of method. I don't know if you've heard of method acting, but
Yeah.
almost method
Hmm.
acting in a way too, where I feel like I personally get very deep in the headspace of a character, and for better or for worse, because sometimes when dark things are happening to the character, it's not the best space to be in as a writer. But yeah, you really try to inhabit the world of the character and try to see things from her eyes, and try to explain things in terms that she would know, and try to only write down the things that she would think or say, and not
Yeah.
the things that you would be thinking as an author, like, oh God, what is happening to you, but as a character experiencing it. So I don't know if this answered your question at all.
Yeah, no, that's great. I suppose this might be a good point for us to hear your overview of the story. I always like to leave it to the author so that I don't do any spoilers. So what can you tell us about the Poet Empress, and then we'll dig in a little bit deeper.
Oh, I am so bad at accidentally spoiling my own book. I feel like I've done that so much. Um, so let's see. So it's about Wei, the main character. She's a 16-year-old daughter of rice farmers, and she's living in this historical fictional dynasty called the Azalea Dynasty, which is so full of famine. Everything's super bleak. She's just lost the fifth child in her family, so she's had to bury her sister as the very first scene of the book. So this is a very, very dark and bleak place that she's coming from.
Hmm.
And she cares a lot about her family, her community, her little brother, who's only 7 at the beginning of the story. And she wants him to not be buried and for him to have better opportunities. So the only way she sees to accomplish this is when the imperial party comes to her town and is asking for people to volunteer, young girls to volunteer to be concubines to the cruel prince who's going to inherit the empire after the current emperor, who's very sick, passes away. She volunteers, despite hearing all sorts of rumors about how terrible and cruel this heir to the emperor is. And so she goes to the palace, and and then she soon discovers that court life is just so much worse than even the rumors. Like there's constantly people trying to take her life. There's power plays, there's struggles, there's courtly intrigue, and worst of all, the prince is super. He is as terrible as the rumors, and then some. He is just this awful, awful person. And then the only way she sees to save herself and also at this point the nation from this cruel tyrant is to find a way to kill him. And the only way to kill him is by writing a magical poem because there's poetry magic in this world, but it's only
Yeah.
available to people at the top. So women are forbidden to read and write, women are forbidden from education, even people who are not from the cities, like villagers, they're forbidden from education. So she's really trying to learn to read in secret while all these things are going on, and she's being harmed from all sorts of directions in order to hopefully try to save herself and the nation.
Yeah, yeah. I don't even know where to begin with Lady Yen. She was such in the beginning she was like you said, young, maybe naive, uneducated from that perspective too. But as the arc goes on through the story, she's so intelligent, so quickly to understand the dynamics. And I know that she has some people around her helping with that, but she's able to absorb it and able to understand it and how to really fight against it in a sense. And I know that at least to me the publisher marketed it as a romantasy. But I looked at it a little bit more as an epic fantasy, and mainly because of terrible Terren, which is the prince, and because he did some really bad things to her, and I was just really curious about he's not even like a morally gray character. I mean, he is black as black can be. And so just talk to me about Taryn and how you, I guess, got the nerve to write this character into this story, and do these kind of despicable things to your protagonist, Yen.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank
Sorry,
you
that
for
was a huge, big question. I apologize. I went on and on
That's
because
okay.
I was just so taken with this story and how it all unfolded and the characters. And so, yes, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, these are terrific questions. I appreciate that you noticed how intelligent Wei was. I think that was one of the difficulties of writing in first person, going back to a previous topic where you can't really, say these things out loud. You have to kind of show them
Mhm.
through. And I really much wanted to write a female young woman character who was able to navigate this in a very she is a lot more intelligent than a lot of the men on top, but she's not given the opportunities or the privilege or the ways to show it, in a world where power is held at the top and only the very people at the top are able to write poems and perform magic. And so how do you get on top as somebody who's coming from a village background, and you really have to rely on yourself and your community and the people around you who have supported you, and that was really important to me. So thank you for saying that. And
Yeah.
as for your questions, I think you mentioned romanticy, you mentioned Terren as a main character, and I think this is actually something my publisher and I have talked a lot about, and I think I actually really like how my publisher is approaching things. I think it is um, a, an imprint primarily known for romantic stories, but it's not a romantasy imprint, and that's something I didn't know when I was first having these conversations. But if you look on the Bramble website and you look at their social media, they talk about how it's a place for stories about love, and not
Hmm.
necessarily like the happily ever after, like completely neat kind. There's also it's also about stories that end messily, stories that don't have a clear conclusion, stories that are maybe not necessarily about romantic love, but other types of love too. And I think that was kind of really exciting to me because I knew that this story was not a romantasy, and the publisher agreed it's not a romantasy. But where we do agree on, or we do believe, is that this story is a story about love. And
Mm.
that's comes from the premise of the story too. And
Yeah.
where the story she writes to kill this evil, terrible man has to be written with love. And that contradiction inherent in the premise is where the whole story comes from, in my opinion, is where like meet like the tension of like having to kill this person, but to do so you have to find the love for this cruel, evil person first. And I think that was really the heart of the story for me, and it was really encouraging and really thoughtful that the publisher saw that in the story and is
Hmm.
trying to push that aspect of it rather than the like marketing it as a romantasy.
Hmm.
And we've put in all the copy, we've put like epic fantasy just so people were setting the right expectations. But I do love how they saw to the heart of the story and saw that it was a love story. And a love story even for this cruel, terrible person, as you're alluding to, because he is just, yeah, he's a terrible person. And I was very invested in writing a story where you have this maybe familiar setup where a woman is in this forced marriage situation to this cruel, violent, evil man. And I think sometimes one direction the story could have gone is that she realizes that this cruel evil man has some trauma that explains his actions, and she's like, oh, he's actually not that bad after all. And maybe there's a love, like a romantic love story, and he's forgiven. And I very much deliberately wanted to write a story where it goes in a different direction. I don't think that, and hopefully this is argued through the book, but I don't necessarily believe that past trauma can excuse all of the present behavior. And it was very important for me to write about a young woman who is in a situation where there's one way the story could have gone, and then she does learn that there is some terrible trauma that explains the way he is. But I very much deliberately wanted her to not forgive him for it, and that was really important to me, and that was important to the publisher too. And so that is how the character came about, where
Yeah.
there is this the person has to be really truly vile for the story to work. So I hope that answers your
Yeah.
question.
No, you did, and I was curious. This question came up as I was reading the book, and forgive me if you answered it in the story and I missed it, but I was curious about in this time period, especially the where you know Wei was at as far as socioeconomic and the court or the royal court where it's so far removed, but yet Terren made her his Empress in waiting. And I'm trying to, why do you think he did that? Or do you think it was, just kind of stick it to the royal family kind of thing? Or why do you think, what was it about Wei that he decided she would be his Empress in waiting?
Yeah, so that is probably a lot of factors, including the factor that you were talking about. It is alluded to in the book, but I think maybe some historical context could also help where in this the historical setting, it's
Yeah.
inspired by, there's a lot of pomp and showmanship, I think, involved in court where you have to show people that you are taking honky buns at night, or you're trying to, you are visibly allied with this person, you're visibly um, performing your duties. And I think that might be part of it where he thinks, okay, I can take this person as my empress in waiting and show people that I'm performing my duties, and that's going to be, that's going to be it. And to the outside, everything is
Yeah.
going well. And it's probably a lot easier to do that with somebody of no social economic status, no connections, nobody to support her word against his, and all sorts of different factors.
Yeah. Now you talked a little bit earlier about the poem that, she had to love him before, she could write this poem that would kill him. Can you tell us a little bit more about this heart spirit poem and, how you came up with it and why it's so important to the story?
Yeah, so the process of writing this story was, I had the first few chapters, and I had the magic system, and I knew it was about poetry, I had the setting, I had, like, even the major characters, but I didn't really have a story until I found the heart spirit poem. And the standard I sort of hold myself to as a genre fiction, as a fantasy science fiction author, is that when I introduce a speculative element, I like to tightly integrate it with the story. It's not just there for decoration. It has to be
Yeah.
core to the theme, the plot, the characters, and everything. And I think I didn't find that necessarily until I had arrived at the heart spirit poem, where the we talked a little bit about the contradiction. To judge that someone needs to die, you have to learn, like, find the love behind that first. And even the themes that it relates to surrounding literacy, and who has access to literacy, and who has access to writing the histories, and who gets to tell stories. I think all of those enormous themes are tied very nicely into the heart spirit poem. And also, I think there's a whole emotional core to the story as well that is tied with the speculative element, where yeah, you do hate this person, but you have to find a way through all that hatred, and in order to kill him. So I think there's a lot that the element of the heart spirit poem brings in. I think it brings in the themes through, like, metaphorically, and it brings in the emotional aspect, and it is truly also the plot of the book, because there is a drive forward for a way to find out what is happening to him, versus she just comes across it by circumstance, if that makes sense. There's a
Yeah.
proactivity in the
Yeah.
in protagonist moving the plot forward.
I thought the way that you revealed or yeah, I guess revealed would be good word for it. Terren's trauma. I thought that was brilliantly done. And again, no spoilers here, but at the end, whenever she employed the Heart Spirit poem, how all of that played out was just I mean, mind blowing. I mean, literally mind blowing how you wrapped that up. And because I didn't know how you were going to do it. And then, yeah, gosh, I want to talk about, I want to get into detail about it so badly here. But folks, read the book because it's amazing. It's an amazing debut. The ending is just phenomenal. And I can't say enough about it really. It's so wonderful. And I loved how your publisher even included some of the Chinese characters for some of the English words in there. I thought that was really neat. That was a nice visual that was unexpected but very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I think part of the story is what we're talking about, very much wanting to write a story where a young woman overcomes um the person who abuses her and doesn't forgive him. But the other part was also I just wanted to share a love for language, both English and Chinese, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
Chinese classical poems that I read and loved and memorized as a kid, and that was an important part of me, and so I was overjoyed to be able to share that in the book, including with the language chosen. And
Yeah.
also I love the English language, clearly. So I just love that poetry and storytelling could be part of the book and deeply integrated on in the book on an almost meta level. So thank you so much. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
you betcha. Oh yeah, no problem. And I think that you alluded to this a little bit in our discussions about Way, but on this show, we like to talk about the story stakes. Love, death, the fate of the realm. They're all very high stakes in a story. But what can you tell us that, as far as what is personally at stake for Lady Yin?
What is personally at stake for her? Yeah. Yeah, there's always that's something I think about too, like what's the personal stakes versus what's the world stakes. For her, I think she just really wants to see her family safe and fed, and her little brother who she loves very much. And I think that is something we can all relate to, when the world is kind of terrible, you just want to protect the people you love. And
Yeah.
that is initially what she goes in for. And it may turn out that the stakes are bigger than that, but I think that is that love of her family and that love of community is something that she holds on to throughout the entire book.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you're a debut author, you're exposed to a lot of firsts, your first agent, your first contract, first book cover, all of those types of things. There's so many and they're all wonderful for the most part. What has been your most joyful first as a brand new author? And I know it's not fair to ask for one, but if you could tell us what your most joyful one, whatever springs to mind.
That is such a fun question. I really think my most joyful moment is getting those first reader reactions, because I think you spend so long as a writer writing a book by yourself, and you don't even know, as a debut author, you don't even know
Mhm.
if it's going to see the light of day. Like it could have been my ninth trunked manuscript in the next one, but and then
Right.
we'll be having this conversation about the book that comes after. So, um, yeah, so you don't necessarily know if it's going to be read, and once it's read, how it's going to be received. I will say that when I wrote it, I remember telling my agent, I was like, if one person reads it, I'm going to be so happy. If like 100 people read it, I'll feel fulfilled as a writer because I poured like my heart into the story, and just for it to there to be a human being on the receiving end is just so special. So yeah,
Yeah.
getting those first, even like the when it went out to submission to publishers, even like having the editors come back and say, I read this and I loved it. And there's other people involved in the acquisitions process,
Yeah.
um, as well. So even like getting those like few dozens, like 100 people reading it, I think I felt like completely fulfilled at that point. I was like, um, wow, it's read. And then you get your first readers who are outside of industry. I remember the first time I got a fan mail. It was from a 69-year-old granny from the UK, and I thought it
Aw.
was at first because it was so, written a little bit weirdly formatted, but it was just the most touching, genuine, encouraging like email I've ever gotten. And the first reader who said it was their favorite book ever, I think those moments I will just remember for the rest of my career. So thank you for that
It's that
question.
valid.
I'm
No.
emotional now.
Oh, that's great. No, it's that validation that we as humans tend to seek out for a lot of different things that we do. But authors, yeah, it never gets easier, and we always have this this thing where we feel like imposter syndrome, I think is what some people call it, so that all of that kind of sticks with us. So whenever you have people sending you lovely emails, it's like, okay, I did it. It was good, kind of thing. So that's great.
Yeah, it's definitely something I try to hold on to when like I'm writing my next book right now, and there's been some very difficult moments. And there's been difficult moments like all throughout, even with the debut. And then I think it really helps when I take a step back and remember like what is this for? Why am I doing this? And
Yeah.
I think writers tell stories to connect with other human beings, and at the end of the day, that's what it's all for, and that helps to focus me. And other things maybe don't matter as much as long as I keep in mind what this is all for at the end of the day. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, my last hopefully fun question is what is one thing that your fans might be surprised to learn about you?
oh, I don't know. If that's surprising, or am I kind of a vanilla individual? Um, I think I had touched on some of this, but not all the writing I do is that dark. In fact, none of the books I ever written were dark before the Poet Empress, and that sort of came as a surprise and a learning experience for me, because when you kind of set up the world in a certain way, it has to be, you have to go certain places, I think. If this is the way the world works, if women are
Yeah,
forbidden literacy, if they're, um, you know, sent against their will to the palace to serve as concubines, I think there are certain places where the story has to go. And I was not prepared at first, and it was a very long and difficult process for me to go there. But yeah, I think readers may be surprised that not like every single book before then it was like joyous, and
yeah.
and I'm currently working on a book for young adults right now, which I'm really excited about, and I can't wait to share more about. And and so look forward to more books from me, but not all
Uh-huh.
of them are going to be like the Poet Empress.
Great. No, that was going to be my one of my final, questions of the interview is to find out what's coming up next. So it sounds like we can look forward to a young adult novel maybe in the next couple of years here.
Yeah, I'm super excited for it. So thank you so much for asking.
Oh yeah, you betcha. Well, folks, be sure to order your copy of The Poet Empress today. You won't be disappointed. You can learn more about Shen at shentao.ca for Canada, where you'll also find all of her social media links. Shen, thank you so much for joining me. Congrats again on your debut novel. I hope you continue to enjoy every moment of it.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a real delight, and we were chatting a bit, before the call about how nervous I was and but this was so comfortable and so fun, and thank you so much for your amazing questions.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. That's it for today's high stakes story. Follow the show so the next episode lands right in your feed. And if you enjoyed today's chat, a quick rating or review helps new listeners find us. Visit tracydevlyn.com/podcast for show notes and links to today's amazing guest and their fabulous book. High Stakes is a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. Thanks for listening. Until next time, enjoy the adventure, everyone.